We're here to do another episode of Leading Edge. We're super excited today because this is actually our first podcast where we have a guest, and it's not just Alana and myself. So excited to have Jeff Sesol with us today. Jeff is an entrepreneur himself, a leader, a dad, a granddad, and an author of a book that was just released this year called The New Leadership Landscape. And so excited to have Jeff here with us. Jeff, as always, love to have you tell us a little bit about yourself. You'll do a way better job than I could. So please, Jeff.
Well, John, thanks first of all for having me on, and I'm honored to be the first guest. How exciting that is. These podcasts are a lot of fun. I've been doing one for almost 4 years now, and it's just amazing the information that you find out when you're able to interview people and just learn all the different things. So congratulations for you guys for doing that, because it is a lot of fun. So yeah, as you said, I'm an entrepreneur. I've been entrepreneurial since 1993. I've had several of my own businesses throughout the years. A couple that I've built. One I built up and sold. One I've built up and gave to my partner, because I was like, after 5 years, we were almost there and then done. But it's one of those things you go through when you're an entrepreneur, right? You work hard, and you're hoping for the best, and sometimes they just don't always work out. But now I kind of got into, it's funny. I do a lot of coaching, and that I was doing consulting for many years, helping people grow their businesses, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. But when you consult, it's more of a full-time gig with one company. It's hard to do multiple companies and split your time. And I just don't find it effective that way if you're consulting, which means the difference is coaching is you're helping the owners and you're coaching the owners to do the work, versus consulting is you're kind of actually doing the work for them. And so then it takes a lot more time. So during COVID, as a lot of people did, I reflected on my life and looked in the mirror and said, hey, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And I just turned 60, and I kind of said, well, what do you like to do? And I said, well, I love helping people grow their businesses and being better about what they do. And so I said, okay, great. So that's kind of the mission statement. So how are you going to do it? And then I said, well, if I continue to consult, I'm basically helping one company at a time. But if I coach, I can help multiple companies at a time, which really is what I like to do. So I like to get in and do that. So I started that in September of 21. And it's been a blast. I mean, we're rolling into our fourth year, getting ready to start our fourth year now, in September of this year. And, just really having a lot of fun doing it, working with people, working with small to medium-sized businesses, working with corporations on leadership, and just having a blast with it.
Awesome. So, one thing that I've always been curious about, as I've gotten to know you a little bit over the last while, is the name of the company, Pull the Chute. So I'm curious how you came to that and what it means in context of this sort of leadership, coaching, all of that stuff that we do.
So when I was turning 40, I decided one of my bucket list things was to go skydiving.
Not on my list.
Yeah, it was, and it was great. I mean, it was one of those interesting things. Literally, you sign the contract that basically says, if you die, they're not held responsible, and you sign it, right? And it's fun. But so then it's funny because they put you through all these things, and then they say, how do you feel? How do you feel? And I was like, let's go, right? Well, the funny part is that we got in the plane, and there's only 14 in the plane. It's a little like not even a passenger plane. You sit on the floor, and everyone sits in front of you. And when it got to be my turn to go, the guy said, all right, I was a tandem. He said, I'm going to buckle up next year, behind you, and we're going to go on our knees over to the door. When we get to the door, put your hands in front of your chest and across them, and then just tumble out and tumble as many times as you want. Open up when you're ready, like we showed you. I said, okay, great. And he said, how do you feel? I said, I feel great. Let's go. So we got on our knees. We went over to the door. And as I looked down, I realized that I was 14,000 feet up in the air. Right? It's almost 3 miles up. And all of a sudden, the fear hit me. And instead of my hands going across my chest, they went to the door frame and locked on. And he very gently reached around me, put my hands in front of my chest, and pushed. And so here's the first thing you notice. When you're falling like that, first thing you notice, it's really hard to breathe. One little movement of your hands, you're spinning out of control. Everything's happening so fast, you can't see where you're at and you can't see where you're going. But at 5,500 feet, I pulled the chute. And suddenly I could breathe again. I was in control, see where I was at, and see what I wanted to go. And that's what I tell people is a lot like being in business. Okay. Is sometimes, you just feel like you're totally out of control. You can't breathe. You have no clue where you're going and what you're looking at. And so I want people to pull the chute, for at least an hour a week where I can coach them and help them to work on their business instead of always being in their business. So that's where the name came from.
I love it. I love it. And certainly in the context of, the title of your book, The New Leadership Landscape, this is becoming even more important now
Right.
that maybe leaders who have been leaders for a while need to go up in that plane and jump out and pull the chute because
Right.
everything's changing. So I'm curious from your perspective and your book, maybe what are the things you're seeing with your clients that are changing particularly?
Well, I think what I'm noticing, the reason I wrote the book was because we need change. What's happening is, as of right now, 75% of the workforce is millennials. 69% of those millennials feel unprepared to be in leadership roles. Why? Well, because when you were a millennial, everyone got a trophy. You didn't have to work for anything, right? Everything was handed to you. And, a huge mistake, but that's what happened, right? And so the poor millennials, is not their fault. It was the parents really kind of screwed that all up. And so they don't really know what leadership is all about. They just kind of wing it, right? And for most times, let's say you're doing really good at your job and they put you in a leadership role. They're going to put you over people and manage people. They don't teach you how to do that though, right? And so everyone kind of has to figure it out. Well, how do you figure it out? Well, one of the things that you do is you say, well, you're influenced by your parents, by family members around you, by friends, by old bosses. How did they do it? What did you like? What didn't you like? How would you do things different, right? And that's a problem. It takes time to figure all that stuff out. And the biggest problem is most of them all lead with emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And John, you and I have talked about the emotional intelligence issue.
Yeah.
Instead of kind of saying, pull the chute, quote unquote, take a moment, take a breath, figure out where you want to go and how you want to get there. And don't make it about emotions. Because usually when things happen, everyone makes it about themselves. Yep. And the reality is, if you're going to be a good leader, it's not about you.
No.
It's about the other people. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to teach them.
Yeah, it's interesting. On my way home from dropping my son off at camp today, I was talking to my brother and we talked just about this. So, his son is going through a transition stage in his life and maybe struggling a little bit with it. My daughter, no different. And we talked about this fact that we were doing the best we could as parents.
Right.
Recognizing all these cues that we had from our parents, trying not to repeat, but maybe we went a little too far the other way. And now we've got, this generation that hasn't had to work for as much, hasn't failed, quite frankly, right? Because we're always putting in parameters to make sure they don't fail. But the real world, that's not what happens. The real world, these people transition from a really great technical expert in whatever it was, and now they're thrust into this leadership, and they're still expected to perform pretty quickly. So, I certainly know from working with our clients what some of the biggest challenges are for these people. I'm curious what you're hearing from your clients as to what some of the, one or two of the biggest challenges that they are faced with, notwithstanding emotional intelligence being one of them. We could go off on that tangent for sure.
Sure. And I think for the most part, the clients that I work with is that they don't know how to build trust within their employees.
Okay.
Right? So they're not transparent. They don't show empathy. I teach them to share appreciation because that's a big factor. But I think the biggest thing is that they don't know how to build trust within their things. And what do I mean by that? Well, we've all been in meetings where someone throws, the boss is talking about an idea and I might have had a thought on that idea, right? Or whatever the topic was, but I'm afraid to say something because I don't want to be the idiot in the room that said something and everyone looks at me, like I got four eyes, right? Because I don't feel safe to be able to say that because they haven't built trust up in the culture so that I can say that. They don't ask my, hey, what do you think, Jeff, kind of stuff. They tell you what to do. When I started my career at Harris Bank in Chicago, it was very much, you kept your head down, you did your job, you went home, you got a paycheck. We don't pay you to think, we just pay you to do the job. Right. And that's really one of the big changing factors now that exists. That's why it's the new leadership landscape, is because leaders back then had all the answers because they were expected to have all the answers.
Right.
Leaders today don't need to have all the answers. As a matter of fact, it shows their vulnerability that if they don't have all the answers, and what they can do is they can ask their people, hey, what do you guys think? And the smart move there is to do that, because if you're the leader and you're in a room by yourself, it's got like you have blinders on. You don't have all the pieces, right? But if you talk to the people that are actually doing the work, they probably have a much better idea about what's going on and how to do things and what they need to have to be
Yeah.
successful. Things of that nature. Why would you not ask them
Yeah.
instead of just telling them, right? And so that's some of the things that I'm working with these leaders is
Yeah.
getting them to understand that leadership is really, the first thing is it's not about that, and the second thing is it's okay for them to build this environment, this culture where people can actually have input, and you want them to have input, and you want to give them what they need to do their job better. And ultimately, I tell people, look, ask them what they need to do their job better, and then if it's within reason, get it for them, because now they own that job,
Yeah.
right? And they're going to do it to the nth degree. Most of the time, one of the stats is like people probably give us 50% of their energy at work. Well, if that's because they don't care about the job. If someone cares about their job, you're pushing up to 75 and 80%. And boy, you're getting so much more done.
Yeah, I was listening to one of your podcasts with you and Jana recently, and a stat that one of the gentlemen brought to that was $3 trillion is what that gap of 50% is costing the
I
economy
know, right?
annually, and that one really struck me as something important. Couple things that I took from what you just said. One is it sounds to me like this book that I read many years ago, Drive by Daniel Pink, is at play here. What he says is it's the surprising truth to what motivates people. And he says the three things are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So let me self direct my work, let me get better at my work, and
Right?
then give me a sense of purpose of why my work matters.
Yeah.
And I hear a lot of that in what you're saying. I am curious, though, to dig into one other thing that you said is this trust thing, because
Right.
I agree. I think it's paramount, and I think at the speed with which we're working these days and how we work, which is largely driven by these things, it's harder to build trust these days because the relationships aren't the same as what you and I are doing now, or things. Everything happens through an email or an
Right.
instant message or a text. So I'm curious, in your opinion, how do we actually build trust in a meaningful way?
And that really goes back to the leader. And so what they need to do is they need to show their people that they care about them, that they're willing to listen. A lot of times bosses aren't willing to listen. Um, and so that you're able to kind of work with them. What you want to do is be able to walk the walk, talk the talk, stand shoulder to shoulder with your people, and help them to be successful. Leadership is when things go wrong, you take the blame. When things go right, you give the praise.
Yeah.
And so when you can do that, people are more willing to trust you. I mean, how many times have we heard someone say, "Do you trust me?" Right? And unless it's someone you know really well, most of the time it's like, "Do I?"
Right.
um, but if you're the leader, if you're the boss, and you're taking the company in a direction, one of the biggest things that you can do is tell your people why they're doing what they're doing, because this is what the result is that we're looking for. So I call it the why and because, right?
I like that.
And trust me, Generation Z, they're not going to put up with not knowing why they're doing something. They're a different generation altogether. They want to know why you want them to do certain things. Once you explain that to them, they're all on board, but they just want to know why. Well, that didn't exist in the past. It was like, go do your job. Why? Because I said so.
Yeah.
Right. And it doesn't fly that way anymore. Right. And so when you're building trust, one of the key factors is to let them know why they're doing what they're doing, because this is the result we're looking for. Right. And people are way more willing to do that. And that helps to build the trust within it. But, again, when someone comes into your office and they want to talk, be a good listener.
Mm.
That's trust, right? And then offer advice at the end, but let them kind of spill everything out that's bugging them, and try not to interrupt them. That's another good thing. Tell people how much you appreciate them. I've always, one of the companies that I was helping recently, what I had them do was once a month. It was whatever of the month, like it was popcorn of the day, or they all have all these events once a day or whatever. And one Wednesday was National Popcorn Day, and so they sent everyone tins of popcorn. And so when they had their call, the business call, and everyone was online, and there was probably 18 people. They were all sitting there eating popcorn while they're online, right? Something small like that shows how much you appreciate your people.
Yeah.
And the amount of work that got done after that was incredible, just incredible. And we
I
used to do
think,
that.
yeah, one of the things I'm hearing there, I think I am, I want to check in with you on this, is we almost have to slow down to speed up. So
Yes,
I feel one of the things I've often said is at COVID, we got really good at making sure things happen and continue to happen, but we might have got more transactional and less relational.
correct.
And
Absolutely.
what I think I'm hearing is if we're going to be good listeners, if we're going to show them we care about them, if we're going to appreciate them, none of that's about the operation. None of that's
Right.
about the business. It is,
Right.
some ways, but that's about slowing down and just being human and being personal, which
Right.
will get us what we want, what we need as leaders. But it might seem oxymoronic to some leaders that's what's going to get them what they want and need.
Well, and John, here's one of the struggles. Leaders, what happens with leaders is they go, well, I don't have the time for that, right?
Mhm.
I got to get my job done too, and I got to lead with all these people. Well, be a smart leader, right? So there's certain aspects of the job that you do, but maybe you can push those off onto some of your people,
Right.
right? Which would give you more time to take care of your people. Now the work's all getting done and they're being taken care of,
Yeah.
right? So don't think as a leader that you have to take all the work that you were doing and be a leader. Look at what you're doing and see, what are some small things that I can hand off to some of my people, let them excel at that, and then you can care about your people.
Right. Of course, the challenge with that is from looking through it from the lens of the leader is, you know, what we're talking about here is delegating. And in the short term, it actually takes a bit longer because you got to teach
Correct.
them and you got to invest the time in getting them to be able to do it. But I always say this is chicken or egg.
Yeah.
If I don't do it, I should expect that I'm going to continue to have all this work and not have the time.
Yep.
If I take the time, yes, it's an investment, but eventually I'm going to get more time back
Right.
once that investment pays off. But I think a lot of leaders these days can't see that in the
Right.
onset, and they know they can do it better and faster, and all those things are true in the short term. But
Yep.
there's certainly a long term impact to that, uh, as we go. So
Absolutely.
I'm also curious on that sort of time thing because we hear that a lot,
Yeah.
especially in this new landscape. What are you seeing that's getting in the way for these leaders to be as effective as they could be?
They get overwhelmed too
Okay.
quickly. And so what happens is when there's too many things to be done, they get overwhelmed and it's almost like they go, where do I start? What do I do? All this other stuff. And so what I'm working with them is to manage themselves in time.
So what I'm hearing there is this function of time, function of delegating, and to delegate effectively, of course, I gotta. It's an investment that I have to make. It's that chicken or egg we often hear is right now as a leader they're looking saying if I do this it's going to be faster. I know it's going to be done right, and I don't have the time to teach somebody else. But if you never teach them, you're never going to have the time.
Right.
To do it. So I'm certain that's at play in the context of this time, though, Jeff, and in this new leadership landscape. How are you helping your leaders to be effective in this new world?
Well, one of the big issues they run into is that they get overwhelmed and they look at everything that has to get done and they can't get their arms around it. So then they're stuck. They're like, where do I start? What do I do? How do I do this? And so one of the things that I always do is I work with them and say, okay, let's knock off a couple of the little things. Let's hit some base hits, right?
Yeah.
Baseball analogy, right? We'll do a couple of base hits. We'll knock a couple of small things off. And suddenly when you can do that, the overall piece doesn't look as challenging anymore. And so I get them to start doing that. And really what we're doing is we're not managing time, but we're managing themselves in time. As
Okay.
people always say, I'm doing time management. And I always say, I correct them. I go, you're not really managing time. You're managing yourself in time
Okay.
because time is time. We can't manage that, right? But we try to do that. So yeah, one of the interesting pieces that I've come across is that as they're trying to figure this all out, they have a tendency to start looking too far down the road instead of looking at some small things that are right in front of them. So that's one of the things I try to make them do is say, look, what's right in front of you? What's a couple of things that you can just knock off today and it'll make you feel better about tomorrow. And then we'll continually work on that long, big term piece. But it's going to take more time. But just kind of knock off some of the small things, and suddenly they feel like they can breathe again. That's an interesting point.
Yeah, I'm curious too. One of the things that, and this goes back, tying back into one of the things we talked about earlier with this Gen Z, is if they don't understand the why, they're not going to be bought in. So, one of the things we work a lot with on the managing time is big rocks and little rocks. So what you just described is little rocks. Let's move some little rocks and get them out of the way. But these big rocks take more time. You got to plan for them over a period of time and pick away at them maybe week by week. Do you talk to your clients a lot about that, or how do you support them with the differentiation there?
Exactly how you described. It's an important factor. And what's really cool is when they realize that they're breaking down that big rock as well, right? All of a sudden they look and they go, "Oh man, that's almost done now." Right, because they were just picking little pieces of it and working on it. I kind of liken it to I'm remodeling my basement. I had a 1,200 square foot blank basement, right? And I knew that I wanted to put walls up. I wanted my office down there, a kitchenette, a bathroom, 2 bedrooms, and a living area. And when I first looked at it, I'm like, wow, put the first wall up, and I'm like, this is really overwhelming. But I just kept working at it, and now it's all framed out. Some of the rooms are now drywalled, and I look at it and I go, oh, that's not so bad now. It actually kind of comes together really, really good. Yeah. And so, but that's kind of the analogy that I like to use with the clients, is just to, just keep picking away at it a little at a time. And before you know it, it's going to be a very manageable piece.
Nice. We could keep going forever here. I do want to go back to one more thing. Kind of in your intro, you talked about emotional intelligence. That's a passion project of mine. In terms of this sort of new leadership landscape, what's maybe one thing you could point to that would be really important for leaders to hone in on from an emotional intelligence perspective?
For me, and I've said this before, 2 things. One is it's not about you.
Yeah.
From emotional intelligence, I think that's I can't drill that in enough. Quick story on that. I was teaching a bunch of 8th graders. They had a camp, and I was invited to teach them about leadership. And so the first thing I taught them was, it's not about you. And then during some of the things that we were doing, I said, what's the first thing you learned today? And they're like, it's not about you. Well, 2 days later, they were interviewed on a local TV station. And the one girl was like, yeah, we had this guy come in and teach us about leadership. And it was so cool because I learned that leadership is not about me. And I was like, yeah, got it. Yeah. Right? That was really cool. But the other thing that I think from an emotional intelligence standpoint, that people do is take a pause. In other words, emotional intelligence is one of those things where I feel like too many people react emotionally when things happen. And what I wanted to do is to quote unquote, again, I'll use it, but pull the chute. Just pause, take a breath, feel in control, see where you're at, and see where you want to go with that. And I think that will clear up a lot of the emotional intelligent responses and issues that they have. Yeah. Because it just gives them that sense of, whoa, hang on one second. Let me rethink this a little bit, and kind of put in perspective of where. And if you think about where you want to get to, any situation, instead of just reacting, okay, time out. Where do I want this to go? How do I want this to end? Where do I want this person to be? It just clears the air, clears your thoughts, and makes it so much nicer and easier to work with.
Yeah, I just got an acronym from someone I'm working with recently. She calls it the STOP acronym, and the very first part of it, the S is stop, literally stop. Yeah. And then the T is take a step back. And that could be metaphorical, of course, if you're not physically able to take that step back. But then it's starting to process things differently, and practice mindfulness is the P. So now I'm making a different decision based on the fact that I've slowed down, and I'm not going to be impulsive anymore. Right. Those 2 things actually land within the emotional intelligence tool we use around interpersonal relationship, around impulse control, and within that impulse control is also what we call reality testing. So often when we're emotional, we put blinders on, and so when we slow down and take a step back, it allows us to change all of that too. So. Jeff, we could talk for days, but I love where we've gone for this. We started with the sort of Gen Z and not just Gen Z, but leaders needing
Yeah.
to build strong relationships, build trust, slow down, and let people know that we care. We somehow morphed into time management on this, which is cool because it's all contextual back to if I'm going to slow down and show them I care, I got to build in time for that. I got to make that happen. And then, of course, this emotional intelligence, whether you're a new leader or a seasoned leader, is going to be critically important to your success and the success of your team. So, Jeff, thank you so much for being here. I'd love for you to let people know how they could get a hold of you if
Sure.
they wanted to talk more to you.
Sure. And thanks for having me on the show, John. I really appreciate it. You can reach out to me through the website, pullthechute.net. You can email me, jeff@pullthechute.net. Look me up on LinkedIn. The last name is Sesol. I am the only Cecil on LinkedIn, I think. It's a unique name. And but yeah, I look forward to having it. You can also, if you go to the website, you can schedule a discovery call. There's 30-minute, 60-minute discovery calls where I love to sit and, tell me what's going on. Let's talk about it. I can give you a couple of free things that you can take away and use and leverage right from those calls. And we can see where it goes from there.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. And if you want to grab this podcast, you can get it on our website at www.fairwindstraining.com, or you can pick it up on Spotify as well. So, Jeff, so blessed to have you as our first real guest here
Thanks,
on our podcast. And I hope all is well with you down in the Chicago area and hope to talk to you again soon.
Sounds good, Jeff. Thank you so much.
Bye for now.